Treble, and welcome along to The Assist. My name's Warren Ashurst, and just before we introduce today's panel, I'd like to say here at the Racing Post that we're proud to support Safer Gambling Week. It's a good time to think about your gambling, talk about your gambling, and equip yourself with the knowledge and tools to take control and gamble more safely. 4 key messages to consider this week, and whenever you are gambling, are: it's good to set yourself limits, gambling is not a way to make money, it's good to take a break, and friends and family are more important than gambling. If you'd like more information on Safer Gambling Week, please visit www.safergamblinguk.org. Well, time now to look ahead to this weekend's action. And after the international break, we are back to Premier League and EFL action. And once again, Mark Langdon and Dan Childs are with us to look ahead to the weekend. And we'll start off with the big match, which takes place at the Etihad Stadium on Saturday night. It's Manchester City against Tottenham, a 5:30 kickoff. In terms of the betting for the big game on Saturday, City are 2-1 on to collect the win. It's 19-4 Spurs and 7-2 the draw. Mark, we'll start with you, and we probably have to start with City when you consider what's been going on at the Etihad this week in terms of Pep Guardiola. We understand agreeing a one-season extension to his contract. What did you make of that news?
Yeah, a slight surprise that it was announced so quickly. I thought he'd wait, for the 100 plus charges that they've got sort of hanging over them, and sort of how that sort of plays out in the courts to kind of what league Man City are playing in next season. I don't know if he'll fancy taking them to Altrincham, but he. I mean, it's obviously a great boost for City because it's never ideal situation when a manager, and particularly one of Guardiola's stature, is kind of, you think it's the last season. It fizzled out, didn't it, for Klopp at Liverpool, and it almost becomes like that farewell becomes more important than the actual matches. And now everybody can sort of get their heads down. Man City will look to try to get back to being the Man City that they have been over the last sort of 5 years or so. A number of players are coming back from injury as well, and City tend to struggle actually this time of the year, but they need to make sure that they get back to winning ways soon, because I don't think the lead that Liverpool have got at the moment is one that sort of will overly concern Guardiola. But if it gets sort of any bigger, and that they've got each other, haven't they, next week, which will be an absolute humdinger, that could become a problem. So I think City need to get the game face on, really. I think too much of this season they've spent worrying about Rodri's injury and Guardiola's future, the charges that are kind of hanging over them. They just need to get back to playing football and playing well, because I don't think they've done that enough this season.
No, Dan, they're second favourites now for the title behind Liverpool. Is that a fair indication, bearing in mind the recent form?
I think it's a fair indication, also bearing in mind how strong Liverpool have been, and the fact that Liverpool have had these more difficult fixtures and they seem to be picking up the points. So you're kind of thinking that maybe the total that you're going to need, to win the titles a little bit higher because of that. I think with the Guardiola contract, I just wonder whether maybe they might have done this a little bit later. It was possibly brought forward because of the recent, poor results and poor performances. You get a sense, as sort of Mark was alluding to there, of a little bit of a waning of authority when a manager's in his last year, and it's been a bit un-City-like, I think. I mean, in the past, they've often had injury problems to deal with and have dealt with them a lot better than they have over the last couple of weeks. So you do wonder whether, if it was behind the scenes, they thought they were going to get to that decision, maybe they brought it forward earlier to improve their chances, in the short term. As Mark said there, they can't really afford to be dropping any more points in the short term.
I feel like I have to offer a personal apology to the Tottenham fans after my comments a couple of weeks ago, which said I thought it was a big win over Villa and that potentially that might well have turned a corner, Mark. But obviously the follow-up saw Ipswich win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Firstly, what did you think of that performance? And secondly, where are Tottenham at the moment?
Well, yes, I was at the game. It was a really poor performance, particularly the first half, and that has happened on more than one occasion, really, where Spurs have not been able to play consistently well, like for 90 minutes, and they have these dozy spells in matches, quite often at the start of them, and they're able to retrieve the situation, but got themselves into a right pickle at 2-0 down against Ipswich. I think it's Solanke's goal not been ruled out for handball just after half time. They might still even have gone on to win. And then, crazy as it sounds, they would have been third in the table. And now they go to the Etihad and they're 10th. And it's been a long 2 weeks for the international break. They've actually lost their last 5 games now before an international break. So I don't know if the players are mentally switching off or, if they just run out of steam at certain points. But it does happen quite often for Spurs. Where they're at, I find them one of the hardest teams to weigh up because of their inconsistencies in matches. On the sort of expected goals, they're doing very well. The stats would say they're not giving up loads of really big chances, but I just think that they defend really sloppily at times. And if Ipswich are punishing you, you wonder what Erling Haaland might do.
Suppose, Dan, as well, a bit of an issue for Tottenham recently has been maybe conceding the opening goal and then having to try and fight back, like Mark said there, against Ipswich. Certainly something they can't afford to do, you'd think, against City at the Etihad.
Absolutely, but it keeps happening all of the time, and you can understand it if players are getting tired and fatigued, and maybe making errors, in the later stages of games because of that. But to consistently start dozily, to me, the manager's really got to answer a few questions there, because there's slackness in the way that they're starting game. There's slackness in how they're dealing with certain situations. The corner situation is a running joke that everybody knows that if you've got a corner against Spurs, you just hang the ball under the crossbar and just wait for the chaos to ensue. And that should have been sorted out a long time ago. I just find the attention to detail at times is frustratingly poor, and they can keep continuing to give bad goals away, which leads to a lot of poor results, and I'm not matching anywhere near that. They do well on the metrics all the time, the XG, but in reality, if you watch Spurs games, there's just a sloppiness that pervades a lot of their performances.
So you've said it, Mark. It's hard to read Spurs at the moment. City, of course, on an uncharacteristic dip of form at the minute. Having said all that, what's your best bet for this clash?
Yeah, I don't see City losing 5 in a row. I mean, Tottenham have got a remarkable record, really, against Manchester City. They knocked them out, didn't they? The League Cup. They knocked them out of Champions League. They went there last season with Emerson Royale and Ben Davies as centre-backs and still got a 3-3 draw. So they are a team that unusually perform well, against City, even when it looks like the odds are all against them. But I'm going to go for a City win. I assume there'll be goals. So I'm just going to go for Man City to win by a correct score of 2-1. City's last 5 domestic wins have all been by 1 goal. So they're not putting teams away like you kind of imagine that they used to. And they're not keeping clean sheets either. They're conceding far more chances than you would imagine. So I see Spurs scoring. It's coming up to 100 games since Tottenham last had a 0-0 in the league. So they'll bring the ton up soon enough. I don't expect a 0-0 here. So City to win. I was trying to look for outside of the obvious kind of, you could go City to win and both teams to score, City and over 2.5. I just thought I'd take a punt at about 17-2 that, those outcomes are landed with a correct score.
Dan, you might be watching it from behind the sofa maybe on Saturday evening, but if you were going to have a bet, what you'd be looking at?
I think City will win in possibly a high-scoring game. City haven't been, far from perfect in recent weeks. I just think that if there's a time that they're going to be back at it in any shape or form, this could be it. They've Phil Foden was sort of like kept out of the England call up. They've had Jack Grealish, Akanji, De Bruyne, Stones all back in training. I think they're going to be a lot stronger at the weekend than they have been for a while. And you're against, maybe they won't start completely 100%. It's hard to go from the performances they've been on to being absolutely brilliant. But Spurs are the sort of team, as I mentioned, they often give teams a lot worse than City a leg up. And if City get their nose in front and the crowd get going, I can see it getting quite ugly for Spurs, to be honest. Given that the run, the recent performance against Ipswich, the generally poor away form as well. They've been pretty poor on the road. I think I can see Spurs scoring. That kind of feeds into my tip. City in a high scoring win. I think City and over 2.5 goals is a very solid bet at just a shade of odds on.
Okay, well, that is the big match this weekend, a 5:30 kickoff at the Etihad for Manchester City against Tottenham on Saturday. Time now to look at the rest of the Premier League fixtures, and we'll start off with the early kickoff on Saturday. Leicester against Chelsea at the King Power Stadium. I wonder what sort of reaction that Enzo Maresca will get from the Leicester fans, of course, having brought them back into the top flight. He then moved on to Stamford Bridge, and his side are 2-1 on to claim the victory on Saturday. It's 5-1 Leicester, 7-2 the draw. Dan, we'll start with you with this one. Will it be Maresca celebrating against his old club, or do you think his old side will cause some problems?
No, I think Maresca will be celebrating. I think things are looking quite promising for Chelsea. Third in the league at the moment. They've already played City, Liverpool, and Arsenal among their first 11 games. So they've got a lot of difficult fixtures out of the way, and they've got quite a nice run now. Coming towards the up to the Christmas period, where they could be in a very healthy position. Come the end of the year, they've just got to sort of focus on their tasks now. And I think Leicester away. Leicester are performing quite poorly on the metrics. Had a poor performance last time out, the 3-0 defeat against Manchester United. You can say United were kind of boosted with Van Nistelrooy's last game in charge, but still a poor effort, I think, from Leicester. And I can see Chelsea winning this pretty comfortably. Going to go with the same tip that I went for the City Spurs game, Chelsea to win and over 2.5 goals at evens. The one thing I would say about Leicester, they do tend to score most of the time, so maybe they'll get a consolation.
Mark, have you the same opinion? Are you fancying Chelsea here?
Yeah, I think Chelsea will win. 4 of their last 5 games, though, in the Premier League have been level at half-time. The early kick-off straight after the international break as well, maybe not the ideal time for the bigger clubs to get going. So my tip here is draw half-time, Chelsea full-time, but they, the strength and depth of their squad should see them get the victory ultimately.
Well, we've got 5 games kicking off at 3 o'clock on Saturday, and we'll start with a match at the Emirates, where Arsenal entertain Nottingham Forest. 4-11 Arsenal, 17-2 Forest, and the draw is 15-4. Seems like a huge price for Forest. I know they lost the last game at home to Newcastle, Mark, but bearing in mind the kind of cloud hanging over Arsenal at the moment, could you see they're an upset here?
I could. I'm going to go for a draw. I agree that sort of Arsenal are sort of stumbling somewhat at the moment, and Forest have shown that they are, I suppose, suited to this type of test. I mean, that they've won at Anfield, they've drawn at Stamford Bridge, so they're not overawed by this occasion. Then I have a look at Arsenal, like some really nervous moments at home to Southampton and Leicester, eventually got the job done. But, if they find themselves in a similar sort of scenario against Forest, I don't think they'll be as sort of welcoming late on in the game. They're a decent side, Forest, good on the counter-attack, well organised defensively, might just be able to frustrate Arsenal.
Well, Dan, I suppose it's a case of Arsenal wondering which of the big names are going to be available. I assume that Odegaard will be okay now that he's been back over the last couple of matches.
I think Odegaard, look, he should be ready to start and play a key role. I think Saka and Rice, who, pulled out of the international, you'd still expect them to be fit enough to play quite a key role here. I think Arsenal are at the stage where they've had a poor run, winless run, but got that draw at Chelsea last time out, and they just need to get a win, really, no matter how it comes, just to get themselves back on horse, if you like, and stop that gap growing any further to Liverpool. I think they'll get the win here. Forest, as we've seen, are having a great start to the season. I think you've got to remember we're 11 games in at the moment. I'm not sure they're going to be where they are in the table, come the end of the season. So I think Arsenal will grind it out here, and a low scorer, Arsenal under 3.5 goals is the way I'm going to go.
Well, another side that'll have their eyes set on a top 4 place in the Premier League this season is Aston Villa, and they play host to Crystal Palace on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Villa 3-5 the victory. It's 3-1 the draw and 9-2 Palace. Dan, we'll start with you with this one. Are Villa as strong a favourites as they should be in this game?
I think they're probably about the right price. It's not a price I'll be steaming in to back them out. I've got to be honest. Just because of the run they've been on, they didn't play too badly at Liverpool when they lost 2-0. But that was a fourth, loss, successive in all competitions. That's going to knock the confidence. There's a few injury issues around with Onana, Ramsey, Konza, Torres. Since quite a few doubts there, and I still feel they'll probably get the win. But I wouldn't be sort of like piling onto them. Palace have had a really poor start, haven't they? I mean, got the win against Spurs, then lost 2-0 at home to Fulham. still quite depleted. No Eze, who's a massive loss for them. I just think that Villa, if you don't want to back them at odds on, go with Ollie Watkins, to score any time. His confidence is going to be up after scoring that opening goal for England against Greece. He's odds against to score any time.
Mark, I watched Palace against Fulham last time out, and it was a comfortable win for Fulham, I have to say. And as as Dan mentioned there, with players missing at the moment, the concerns are growing for Palace, I'd suggest.
Yeah, that was a real shocker for them. I mean, the betting, that they drifted like an absolute barge for that game. So the money was right on the money. I suppose really they did have a lot of players out for that game. Yeah, I just I sort of fell for them in that game, but I've generally been against Palace for this season. I thought Villa were fair enough to win this game. I mean, I wouldn't read too much into the defeats at Tottenham and Liverpool, really hard away games. They had Club Brugge as well, where Tyrone Mings just decided to pick the ball up and give away a penalty. Assuming he doesn't do that again, I think Villa will oblige at odds on.
If he does do that again, I don't think we'll see him in a Villa top again. Bournemouth against Brighton is another 3:00 kickoff on Saturday, and the home team 27-20, Brighton 2-1, and the draw 12-5. I was looking at this, Mark, and I'm trying to think, what would I go for here? I think it's a really tough one to call when you consider who Bournemouth have beaten at home and then who Brighton have beaten away from home. What are you looking at here?
I'm looking at Bournemouth draw no bet, and I'm just going to let the expected goals and points tally sort of point towards it, because Brighton are fifth at the moment on expected. Bournemouth are fifth at the moment on expected points, and Brighton are 10th, and then on expected goal difference they're 6th and 12th respectively. So on a lot of the metrics, Bournemouth are seen as having had a sort of better season than Brighton. And that's not really reflected in the prices. I think Brighton have done brilliantly. They sort of come from behind wins against Man City and Tottenham at home. I don't know how much of that was fully deserved and how much was down to the weaknesses in the other teams. I saw them win at Newcastle. I've still got absolutely no idea how they did that, because they were outplayed for virtually the entire 90 minutes. So I actually thought that Bournemouth would be a shorter price. The draw's a decent runner, because Brighton are having such a good season. But if there is to be a winner, I thought that Bournemouth were much the more likely.
Tight one to call, Dan. Where are you going here?
I'm going to go with a draw. I think it's a decent price. I think the reason the draw is quite a big price is because both teams are quite attack-minded and score a lot of goals, so that tends to push the draw price out. But you can get, there's a lot more sort of 2-2 draws happening in the top flight now. Brighton have had a couple of 2-2s at home to Forest and at home to Wolves, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a similar score here. I don't think there's a lot to choose between the two teams. Probably, if I was going to go one way or the other, I probably would have gone with Bournemouth draw no bet, were it not for the fact that Semenyo, he pulled out of the international duty for Ghana, didn't he? I mean, mate, we don't know how fit he's going to be, whether he's going to, maybe he'll feature and be just fine. But I'd like to kind of know that. Ryan Christie's, I think, suspended for Bournemouth. João Pedro has recently come back for Brighton and made a big impact, scored in their game against Manchester City that they won. So there's a couple of little swings there that could swing it back towards Brighton. Tight game, going to go with a draw.
Brighton-Bournemouth then looks a tight one at the Vitality. It also looks hard to call at Goodison Park, really, with Everton against Brentford at 3:00. Everton 7-5, Brentford 2-1, and the draw 12-5. Dan, what are you looking at here?
I think Everton are a decent bet here. I think Brentford, been doing all their best work at home, haven't they? The only team in the Premier League with no points away from home. I get that a lot of those away fixtures have been really tough, but they're going there. Injury doubts over Wissa and Mbeumo. The possibility that neither of them could feature. And Everton, that terrible start to the season where they kept scoring, going 1-0 up, 2-0 up, and losing games. They're actually 1 loss in 7 now. I get it that a lot of those games have been draws, but I think they're going the right way now. Everton going to be a tough proposition at Goodison, so Everton to win the game for me.
And you, Mark, you along the same thoughts?
Well, I'm going to go for both teams to score. So hopefully Everton do score. You can usually rely on Brentford to do that. Both teams have scored in 10 of 11 games for Brentford in the league this season. The one exception was on Merseyside against Liverpool, but I think there's a bit of difference between Liverpool and Everton.
Okay, the fifth and final 3 o'clock game on Saturday takes place at Craven Cottage. Fulham against Wolves. Both of these two teams getting big wins last time out. Fulham 13-20 to get in the win here. 4-1 Wolves and 3-1 the draw. Are Wolves able to build on that victory last time, Mark, or is this going to be a home win?
No, yeah, if you remember, Warren, I was quite sweet on Wolves against Southampton. It was more an anti-Southampton feeling, really, rather than being too hyper about Wolves. This is a much more difficult game against the Fulham side that I'd say flying under the radar, but everybody seems to be saying they're flying under the radar, so maybe they're not. But what they have done is won every game on expected goals since the opening match. They lost that one, sort of in inverted commas, lost on the XG at Manchester United, as well as losing the game. Since then, every single game they've had a higher XG, which I think goes to show just how well Silver's side are playing. They rarely thrash teams, though, so I'm going to go for Fulham to win and under 3.5 goals.
So, say I did see Fulham at Palace last time out, and there's a couple of players there who might well, in the media, have been suggested to pass their best, in Alex Iwobi and Raul Jimenez, who were both excellent in that game, I have to say, Dan. And Marco Silva's clearly getting the best out of his players.
He is. He's doing a great job at Fulham. I think it won't be too long, in the future that he's going to be getting linked with some very big jobs. Marco
Yeah,
Silva.
Danny's second favourite for the Spurs job, I saw the other day,
Well,
actually.
yeah, I mean that. I don't think he would be, if there was to be a change. It wouldn't be a bad call. I think he's certainly capable of managing at a high level. I think the prices. I'm always wary of opposing a team when they've been on such a bad run like Wolves and then got a win. It is a big boost for them. So at the odds, I don't think I'll be piling into to Fulham at those prices. I do feel they'll probably win the game though. And a player that you mentioned there, Warren, Raul Jimenez, getting a new lease of life at 33, 4 Premier League goals this season, scored for Mexico against Honduras on Tuesday, playing against his former club. Players often seem to do well against their former clubs as well. He's 9-2 to score the first goal. I would go for the first goal instead of any time because I agree, like Mark, that it will probably be quite a low scorer. So maybe the any time price won't be such good value. So first scorer, Raul Jimenez.
Two games to look forward to on Sunday. Let's start with the early kickoff, 2 o'clock at St Mary's. Southampton against Liverpool. Possibly not a massive surprise when you look at the league positions to see Saints are 9-1 to win this game. It's 2-7 Liverpool, 19-4 the draw. Southampton, I suppose they've shown little bits and pieces recently, Dan, to suggest that they're not completely dead and buried, but this looks like a big test.
Yeah, very extremely difficult test for Southampton. I do think they'll carry on playing positively and having a go at teams. I mean, the game at Wolves, there was a couple of big decisions, that kind of went against them. Could have gone either way. One of the Wolves goals, maybe shouldn't have stood, and a Southampton goal possibly could have been allowed. Maybe didn't meet the threshold for either to be overturned. But so that was, they could have been ruining their luck a little bit there. I just think that Liverpool are just going to be far too strong in the areas that matter, and they should get the win. I do think Southampton might get on the score sheet as well, though. Their XG is double what their actual goals is. Their XG is slightly over 14. Their goal tally is 7. That's probably not going to carry on being that way. They're going to keep having a go at teams, and I think they'll score more goals eventually. I think they might get one here, but Liverpool should win the game. Liverpool to win and both teams to score.
Where do you see the value here, Mark, in this one?
Yeah, not much value in this game. Expect Liverpool to win comfortably. I'm going to go for Gakpo, first goal scorer. He's got 4 in 3, and I just wonder whether Arne Slot might rotate that forward line. There's obviously been internationals and the South American sort of particularly hard on their legs, and the small matter of Real Madrid to come in the Champions League in midweek. Now, I know the Premier League is more important, but I like the way Slot's been rotating that forward line. If Gakpo gets his chance, I think he looks as lively as sort of anyone outside of Salah in that Liverpool team at the moment.
Yep, wouldn't disagree with that. The late game is all about one man, it would seem, as Ipswich face Manchester United at Portman Road. Ruben Amorim will take charge of United for the first time, and his side are 8-13 to collect the points at Ipswich, who are 17-4, and the draw is 3-1. Firstly, Mark, what do you think we can expect from Ruben Amorim, and will we see a much different Man United?
I think you will, yeah. I mean, in training this week, he's already gone 3-4-3, the formation he used at Sporting, so it's clear he sort of wants to adopt that. So a change in formation, who plays in what positions, that's still to be decided, and you couldn't really, I suppose, take too much info given how many players were away on international duty. But we saw like Anthony playing as a wing back in training, so maybe they might find a use for him after all. But I'm really excited to see how he does. I think that it's a good opportunity for Amorim because Manchester United, I don't think, can go much lower, really, where they are in the table, kind of the expectations, the performances. It feels like you can only really get better from here, and that's always a great place, I think, for a new manager to start. You sometimes get them; they come in, and you feel like the only way is down. For United, the wage bill is such that I think that there's players there that have massively been underperforming that just need a manager to kind of get them going again. Mainu, for instance, haven't seen the best of him, and he looked like could be a world beater at times. Be really interested to see Bruno Fernandes. I think form's already picked up since Ten Hag left. How much can you get out of Diallo and Garnacho? Marcus Rashford, another one. I might get to him a bit later. So I'm excited to see how United go. However, for this game, what I would say is that it's not an absolute gimme against an Ipswich side that got that victory against Tottenham, played very well in the first half. And player that I tipped up to score in that game, I'm going to go for him again, Liam Delap. 100 to 30 to score. He's got 6 in 9. He's just a real handful. And if United move into that 3-4-3, if there is a kind of settling in period that needs to be had, I think he's somebody that can take advantage of that. A player that really impressed me, I think, in the Premier League this season. And I saw him up close a couple of weeks ago. When Ipswich scored that second goal, I won't say exactly what I said, but it was a frustrating couple of words. And then it was like, oh, it's Delap. It's not all bad. I might be the only one that had a small... I thought first it was an own goal, but I was pleased he was given it. And he's a good player. I think, he's got a future maybe at a bigger club than Ipswich in time.
Dan, is there going to be a new manager bounce for Manchester United? Are you expecting that?
Well, the markets are expecting it, aren't they? I mean, Man United, we've been talking on this show earlier in the season, and the markets haven't liked Man United at all. And now they're going into what I would say is quite a tricky test, given that Ipswich have, been pretty competitive most of the season. Had that fantastic win at Spurs, going to be, absolutely buoyant. And now they're quite a bit of odds on, and I'm sure that he'll get a better tune out of Manchester United eventually. That's not going to be particularly difficult to do, but in the short term, with a change of formation as well, it might be a case of possibly one step back to take 2 forward a little bit further down the line. And Ipswich are going to be full of themselves. They've drawn with earlier this season as well with Villa, drawn with Brighton. Now, on the form of the first 11 games, Villa and Brighton have been better than United this season. So why can't they get a result here at home? I think that's well worth backing. I'm going to go for Ipswich or draw double chance at odds against.
Okay, well, our final Premier League game of the weekend takes place on Monday evening. St James's Park is the venue for Newcastle against West Ham. Newcastle 2-1 on to claim the points. It's 5-1 West Ham and 7-2 the draw. Lopetegui survived an international break. Dan, is he going to survive much longer as West Ham boss?
I think not really sure on that. I don't like to sit on the fence, but sometimes you have a tip and you just really... You're almost arguing with yourself for putting it up, and this is the one here this weekend for me. I'm going to go West Ham or draw double chance. It goes against a lot of instant thoughts, but I just think Newcastle's price is just really, really short. I look at the two squads. I don't think there's a massive difference really between the quality of the squads. The XGs for West Ham are actually higher than Newcastle as well. They're just over 17. Newcastle around 16.5. Newcastle, their XG against suggests that they defend a little bit better, not loads. West Ham have got Kudus back after suspension. That's a massive boost for them. I get it that Newcastle, we all know that they're stronger at home, and that is a factor. I'm not sure it should, influence the prices quite as much as they have. So I'm going to take them on reluctantly. Going to go with West Ham or draw double chance.
Yeah, you can understand why Newcastle are favourites with how they've done at St James's Park. But 5-1 is a big price on West Ham. Could you make a case for the mark, or is it going to be a home success?
I certainly wouldn't back Newcastle at sort of 2s on, or you can easily let that one pass. It's just whether you trust West Ham enough to sort of. At St James's Park with the crowd getting up for it. You have to dig in at times, and I just have my doubts as to whether West Ham have got that in them at the moment. But no way am I sort of putting up Newcastle for this game. One bet that sort of stood out for me actually was Lewis Hall at 9-2 to be carded. He's already got 4 bookings this season. He's up against Bowen, who is a very difficult customer in those sort of one-on-one duels, and you sort of can easily see a situation where Bowen does a trick on him or beats him for pace down the outside, and Hall takes the foul and potentially a card as well. So in a trappy contest, that was one bet that stood out for me.
Okay, well, that is the Premier League complete then for this weekend. We'll get Mark's bet builder and some player props a little bit later on as well. But time now to switch to the EFL. Okay, so this week's match in focus in the EFL is a big one in terms of the Championship. Coventry against Sheffield United is an early kickoff at 12:30 on Saturday. In terms of the prices, Coventry 31-20, the draw 23-10, and Sheffield United 7-4. Remember a couple of weeks ago, Dan, we were pretty much breaking the news that Mark Robins had been sacked as Coventry manager. Still no appointment as yet, as we're speaking on Thursday. Frank Lampard being strongly tipped, though, to take the role. Interesting selection, if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Coventry fans are going to be too keen on that one. I mean, he did a decent job in the Championship. You have to remember at Derby when he got into the playoffs. So that's kind of in his corner. But in terms of what he's done in the Premier League, I think there's been already a couple of failures there where. I'm not sure how you can pick him out. If Coventry, you would have thought when Robins went that they would have quite a clear direction and somebody a bit more of a less of a razzmatazz choice, if you like, and more somebody that's going to get the best out of that group that they clearly feel is a group that should be performing better in the Championship. Going back to the Robins sacking, I think you've got to look at what reasoning behind it. Apparently, his assistant who left in the summer, there was a falling out between Robins and AD Vivesh, and that was one of the reasons that Doug King, after Vivesh left, performances seemed to deteriorate and results deteriorated, and that was one of the reasons Doug King acted. Whether Frank Lampard will be the right choice to replace, as I say, I'm not so sure. For this game, sometimes you look at price and it looks too good to be true, don't you? I mean, Sheffield United as outsiders for this game. I mean, I don't think it is too good to be true. I think they're a really solid bet. You can, draw no bet. You can get just as evens or maybe a shade of odds on draw no bet. That's the way I would play it. Sheffield United, they're not amazing on the metrics. They don't, get loads of chances to score lots of goals, but they know how to grind results out. Got some good players in the attacking third. Couple of ex-Coventry players, O'Hare and Hamer, who are quality for the Championship. Kiefer Moore should be back from the minor calf injury that ruled him out for Wales as well. Coventry have got scope to improve, absolutely, but at the moment they're not quite right, conceding a lot of goals. I think Sheffield United are likelier winners.
Just a quick word on Sheffield United, Dan, in terms of the overall and the battle for promotion. Are you quite surprised to see where they are at the moment?
I wasn't convinced they'd be as strong as they have been, but watching them, they're just when you watch them play, they're just a real solid side. Don't give much away. Although they're not scoring bundles of goals, they have got good players. Raksaki, another one that I've not mentioned, is a real quality player for them. So they've got plenty of match winners in the final third. So on what I've seen, although they're not performing great on the metrics, I do think they're going to be right up there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they went up automatic.
Okay, so the big game of the weekend in the EFL, Coventry against Sheffield United. It's Saturday, 12:30. Time now for Dan to run us through his 3 EFL selections for this weekend. And where are we starting, Dan?
They're going to stick with the Championship first up. Going to go with Millwall to win at home to Sunderland. I mean, Millwall, they were performing great on a lot of the shot data earlier in the season and weren't getting the points that they felt they deserved. That's been turning now. They were unbeaten in 7 games. Won last 3 home games. They've won them all 1-0, including a 1-0 win at home to Leeds, which I watched. They were really, tough and strong as you'd expect there. One from like a set piece situation, as Millwall are very, very good at that kind of thing. I just think this is a horrible game for Sunderland. They've dipped a little bit recently. 0-0 draws away to QPR and Preston. 2-2 draw at home to Coventry in a bit of time. Millwall were 2 up in that game and drew the game 2-2. And they got 2 big suspensions. No Joe Bellingham or Patrick Roberts, who are big players for Sunderland. Millwall, I think, to win that game, odds against, good bet. Secondly, going to go into League One. Bolton, I fancy to win at home to Blackpool. Bolton had a shocking 5-0 defeat, didn't they, away to Stockport last time out. Apparently there was quite a bit of illness in the camp. I know a lot of the Bolton fans weren't too forgiving with that. Ian Everett's been taking a hell of a lot of stick, but they had won 6 of their previous 8, going into that Stockport game. So there was, some solid form going into it. They're 3 wins in a row at home at the moment. And less of a pro Bolton bet. It's more of an anti-Blackpool, because Blackpool had a poor performance 0-0 at home to injury-ravaged Northampton last weekend. Couple of attackers, CJ Hamilton and Cole Joseph, went off injured in that game. So they're really threadbare by the looks up front, Blackpool. I think there's a great chance for Bolton to get back on the horse and get a win. Final one, going to drop into League Two. Going to go with Colchester. Draw no bet to win away to Grimsby. May seem a bit of a nutty one. Colchester have had the only League Two team with no away win this season. I'm going to back them to win at Grimsby. 5 of those 7 away games have been draws, though, so they've been competitive in a lot of those games. Got a 1-1 draw at home to Bradford last weekend, where they won the shot count 14-6. Some big attacking players have recently come back. Awar Edwards and Samson Tavido are real game changers for Colchester. And they're playing against the Grimsby side. 3 home defeats in a row, and Kieran Green, a key midfielder for them, is suspended. So Colchester, it might not seem at first glance, shade of odds on, draw no bet, a great price, but I think with the players in and out for both teams, it's well worth a bet.
Tell you what, Dan, there will have been some a couple of weeks ago questioning your Carlisle tip as well, and that came in, of course, against Salford. So obviously, Dan, with his EFL knowledge, sees something there in Colchester. Just to remind you, the EFL selections then for Dan's treble: Millwall, Bolton and Colchester. And it's time now for Mark and his bet builder. Okay, so Mark normally brings us 3 legs of a bet builder, and I think, Mark, you're going to concentrate on Monday's game at St James's.
Yeah, I think, you got 2 options, haven't you, on Monday? You could watch Port Vale against Crewe. I don't think I could put you off, given the way that both of those 2 teams are playing. But if you do stick with the Premier League, then, I like Lewis Hall to commit a foul. I mentioned him earlier as somebody, might be a value bet for a card. More likely to just get the foul up against Bowen. I just think he's one of the kind of best one-on-one players in the Premier League, really, Bowen. So direct, and he's a difficult customer. I'm going to go for the West Ham left back or left wing back, depending on how they play. Emerson to commit over 2.5 fouls. He's committed 21 fouls in his last 5 games, and we know there's 2 things here. 1, Newcastle do attack through the wings, and 2, their crowd sort of bays for blood every time any player goes sort of near one of their own. So I think they call out a lot of free kicks. And then finally, probably the more obvious one of the 3, and that's Isak to score. He scored in his last 4 games, had a slow start to the season, but you can't keep a good man down for long. He is just I think a really quality forward that just had one of them spells at the start of the season. He's really unlucky. I don't know if you saw it in midweek for Sweden. He scored a goal that was ruled out for offside and then not corrected by VAR. It was probably even worse than the Liverpool one against Tottenham from last season. I'm still not sure how they managed to come to the conclusion it wasn't a goal. And I do know somebody that took advantage of a special bet on Gyökeres and Isak both to score in that game. I think was it on Monday, and he's still moaning to me about it.
Well, I don't blame him if that's the case, to be honest with you. But that is the bet builder then for Mark this week. Also, you like to drop us a couple of options in terms of prop shop, Mark, and we're going to be looking at the Ipswich Man United game.
Yeah, so I'm going for two bets in the same game. Marcus Rashford to have a shot on target, and Marcus Rashford to have over 2.5 shots in the game. Amorim has been playing Rashford as the centre forward in sort of his training sessions. I think that's potentially where he sees him playing, and it's a problem area for the team. Højlund, I think he's a player of of potential, but he kind of isn't quite at that sort of United standard in terms of being the centre forward at the moment. Xerxes hasn't looked up to the standard at all, really. So there is a problem sort of position really in centre forward. Rashford has played there previously. If he does get back into that central role, I think those prices might look quite big.
Okay, well, that's Mark's thoughts then on the bet builder and the prop shop. Time now for the assist treble for this week. Dan, we'll start with you with your selection.
With the treble, I'm going to go with Bolton to win at home to Blackpool in League One. I think there'll be a reaction from Bolton after that 5-0 loss against Stockport. You know, they've had a free week last weekend, plenty of time to get their heads around it and refocus. And they're against the Blackpool team. They had that initial sort of bounce under Steve Bruce when he went in there, but there's 7 games now without a win in League One. And as I said, a mounted injury list for them. So Bolton to win this one.
And Mark, who's your selection for the treble?
I'm going for Chelsea. So Maresca to get a win back at the King Power. Chelsea are looking very good at the moment for a top 4 finish in the Premier League. Sort of we're 11 games in. Leicester are doing okay on points gained, but I'm not quite sure how they've got the points they've got. They seem to nick results more often than actually playing well, and I think this is a really tough game for them.
I'm going to drop into League One for my selection, and I'm going with Peterborough to beat Reading. I was quite surprised to see they're around about 10-11. They are absolutely firing on all cylinders at the moment going forward. 14 goals in all competitions in their last 3 matches, and a win on Saturday can see them leapfrog Reading in the table. The Royals have not won any of their last 3 on the road, and I just think the way that Peterborough are attacking teams at the moment, I would certainly like to be on them in terms of this weekend. So just to remind you of the assist treble, Peterborough, Bolton and Chelsea. And we'll conclude this week's assist with the naps. And Mark, we'll start firstly with yours.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Bournemouth draw no bet against Brighton. I just expected Bournemouth to be shorter in the match odds for this game, given the way both teams have played this season. On the data, it's saying that Bournemouth are a better side than Brighton, than what we've seen. And Dan referenced Semenyo's injury earlier on. I mean, I would like to know that he's playing, but there's been problems in that sort of Ghana camp for a while now. So do wonder if that was a bit of a tactical one. You see Jamaica as well. Some of their players lost their passport, which just seems to be a very strange coincidence. So hopefully Semenyo's fit. He's an important player for Bournemouth. But actually, Iraola, finds solutions no matter what the problem is. He's a really top coach, I think.
And Dan, what's your nap for this week?
I'm going to go with Millwall against Sunderland. I mean, I mentioned them 3, the consecutive 1-0 home wins. I mean, the last 2 of them have been against Burnley and against Leeds. 2 of the top teams, expected to challenge for promotion. They're playing another team like that in Sunderland, but I mentioned Sunderland's, recent dip in form, the suspensions to Bellingham and Patrick Roberts. Millwall, I think, might have a little bit too much.
Okay, well, my thanks to both Mark and Dan for all of their tips and advice for this week. Don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment. And if you are a golf lover as well, don't miss the sweet spot, of course, every Tuesday with Steve Palmer. Should flag up that we'll be back on Monday with a Champions League special as European football returns next week. Until then, enjoy your football and please remember to gamble responsibly.